3 kids in a tent and a mom who wisely noticed that our ancestors wandering through the desert did not have REI. Technology has gotten a lot better, but picture a bunch of tents of Israelites and clueless Jews down on the ground just going about their business. Turns out they're being blessed from on high by someone who came to curse them, but totally turned it around. We are on page 141, and straight from the tent, Leora, Izzy, and Eliana, take it away. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Thank you so much. It's good to see you guys. Shabbat shalom. Thank you. Page 151. L'shemith chud kuchabrichu shchinte hineni mochanim zuman lekabel alai mitzvat aseh ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow human as you love yourself. Start there. Uvizchut zeh eftach pi. Alternating genders for the ungenderable. 153 and following. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim hama'avir shena me'enai utnuma me'achapai. Amen. And you can say amen, or you can put in the chat everything that you are grateful for this morning. Baruch ha'at ya Eloheinu chel olamim hanotenet l'sech b'dina lavchin ben yom u'ben laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim roka haaretz al hamayim. Amen. Baruch ha'at ya Eloheinu chel olamim hokachat ivrim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim malbish arumim. Amen. Baruch ha'at ya Eloheinu chel olamim matira asurim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim zokef kefufim. Amen. Baruch ha'at ya Eloheinu chel olamim hamechinam mitzadei gaver. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim she'asa li kol tzorki. Amen. Baruch ha'at ya Eloheinu chel olamim ozeret Yisrael bigvura. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim oter Yisrael betifara. Amen. Baruch ha'at ya Eloheinu chel olamim she'astani betzalma. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim she'asani ben chorim. Amen. Baruch ha'at ya Eloheinu chel olamim she'astani Yisrael. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chel olamim hanoten le'Yaakov. Amen. Continuing in this mixing it up, page 177 has a bunch of additional things to be grateful for, besides hot Belgian waffles and clean dogs and family and hope and health and ability to read music. A beautiful starter list. Keep it coming. On page 177, we get to sing a low part that is pretty much one note, and at the end it goes up a little bit, just like this. Get it stuck in your head, and then you can sing along with these words, which alternate gender for God. Page 177. Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Bruchahi, Baruch Shema, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Bruchahi, Baruch Shema, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Bruchahi, Baruch Shema, Baruch Hu. Baruch Shema, Baruch She'amar, V'haya ha'olam. Baruch She'amar, V'haya ha'olam. Again. Baruch She'amar, V'haya ha'olam. Baruch She'amar, V'haya ha'olam. Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Shema, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Shema.
Now we're in the Songs of Praise, Pesukei de Zimra, otherwise known as the Psalms. And we're going to sing one, and then we're going to share a video of the one that Rabbi Fred was just mentioning, and then one more that we'll sing together in person, except for all of you. This is all on video, which is very strange because we're sitting here in the shul, and we really wish you were here with us right now. So we're on page 227, Psalm 148. I just lost the melody. Hallelujah, Adonai min hashamayim, Hallelujah b'amromim, Hallelujah kol melachav, Hallelujah kol tzva'av, Hallelujah shemesh v'yareach, Hallelujah kol kochvei or, Hallelujah shmech hashamayim, והמים אשר מעל השמיים. יהללו את שם אדוני, כי הוא צבא ונבראו, ויעמידם לעד לעולם, חוק נתן ולא יעבור. יהללו את שם אדוני, כי הוא צבא ונבראו, ויעמידם לעד לעולם, חוק נתן ולא יעבור. הללויה, הללויה, Hallelujah, Adonai min hashamayim, Hallelujah baromim, Hallelujah kol melachav, Hallelujah kol tzva'av, Hallelujah shemesh v'yareach, Hallelujah kol kochvei or, Hallelujah shmei hashamayim והמים אשר מעל השמיים. יהללו את שם אדוני, כי הוא צבא ונבראו, ויעמידם לעד לעולם, חוק נתן ולא יעבור. יהללו את שם אדוני, כי הוא צבא ונבראו, ויעמידם לעד לעולם, חוק נתן ולא יעבור. הללויה.
Another of the Psalms, we're in this section of the service called Pesukei de Zimra, verses of praise, different ways of singing along to say, yea, God, yea, life, yea, existence. And one of those is Psalm 145. It's printed further in the back of the Siddur. All you need to do here is look in the chat. This is where that nigun that some of us opened with comes in. It'll be a little bit of a leitmotif. Get to know it. But Ashrei Yoshvei Vetecha focuses not just on the natural world, but on the microcosm of the natural world that is the tabernacle. And this week, in our Torah cycle, we start all the detail of how to build sacred space, which is always like a mini version of the sacred space that is all of earth. Ashrei Yoshvei Vetecha, happy are we who dwell in God's house. More on that later. Right now, from two amazing musicians in the circle of Joey Weisenberg, the amazing musician who was here a few years ago, two up-and-comers bringing an eco-feminist sensibility to modern Jewish music, Halpert and Batia Levine. We're going to hear Ali, who wrote this Ashrei, introduce it in just 3 sentences, and then I want you to sing along with each part. The I-I-yadadai-ho part, and the Ashrei Yoshvei, and even the English, which I think you will agree complements very nicely. So we're going to try taking advantage of an otherwise empty sanctuary and hearing it in the original, and then we'll get to repeat it over the course of our morning together. Shelley. Ali on the left, Batia on the right.
And a rough translation of the Hebrew that we use is, "Happy are those who dwell in your house." And to me, this is a song that's about just like celebrating ourselves and each other and all of creation. And to me, so much of the work of doing climate justice is to be able to feel our connection with all of creation and to feel how much we love it in order to be able to continue to fight for it.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Shelley and Stu, our Zoom Gabayim screen sharers. Thank you, Ali and Batia in the ether for the music. Thank you all of all ages for being here and hearing some new Jewish music and some old Jewish music. Page 150, one of the old, try that again. Psalm 150, page 231, one of the oldest that we have, but with some great new melodies.
Kol haneshama tehallel Alleluia. Kol haneshama tehallel Hallelujah. 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 Big God show. Hallelujah. Bekia uzo. Hallelujah, v'gvurotav, hallelujah, kerov gulo, hallelujah, b'teka shofar, hallelujah, b'ner v'chinor, hallelujah, betohu machol, hallelujah, b'minim ve'ugav, hallelujah, betziltzele shama, hallelujah, betziltzele truah. Kol haneshama tehallel Hallelujah. Kol haneshama tehallel Hallelujah.
So we've gotten ready for prayer. And if we look around in gallery view and we see so many smiling faces of so many generations, even in so many different locations, taking advantage of what technology can offer us to bring us together in new ways. We are many minions. There may be only 2 people at the moment in here, but on here, there's so many. We are ready for Baruch Hu. We are ready to call each other into praise. And we are thrilled on page 247 to invite Anna Whidden to unmute and lead us in the first prayer that counts each morning.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yoder u'borei choshech oseh shalom u'borei hakol.
Yasher Koach. Thank you so much. Page 257, Anna introduced for us the theme of light and nature. Look around if you're in the DMV, what a gorgeous morning. And we think about how the sun, the right amount of solar energy, is what keeps the seasons going, it keeps the plants growing, it keeps us going as well. So we thank God as the creator of these great lights, and we realize there's more than just Earth out there, right? I don't know who followed the James Webb Space Telescope, but there's this amazing new thing 1 million miles from Earth that's starting to peer into the distant galaxies and figure things out that no human ever could have before. We are one of many worlds. So we say, Lechai Olamim, to the life of the worlds. to the life of the eternities. It's just another way of saying God. But every different image we use for God points in a different direction. And I love the one that reminds us of our place in the cosmos. We are small, and yet we are huge. We are nothing, and we are everything. And we look out and we feel some of that. So, Lechai Olamim is the refrain that I hope everyone sings really loud to your muted screen on page 257 and 259. And for the kids, a challenge to see along the way why each line is in the order that it's in. And if you know, kids, put it in the chat. Page 257.
לחי עולמים, הבינה והברכה לחי עולמים, הגאווה והגדולה לחי עולמים, הדעה והדיבור לחי עולמים, יאללה 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 ההוד וההדר לחי עולמים, הוו ותיקות לחי עולמים, הזוך והזוהר לחי עולמים, החיים והחוסן לחי עולמים, יאללה 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 התכס והתוכל לחי עולמים, הייחוד והיראה לחי עולמים, הכתר והכבוד לחי עולמים, הלקח והליבוב לחי עולמים, יאללה 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 המלוכה והממשלה לחי עולמים, הגוי והנצח לחי עולמים, הסגוי והשגב לחי עולמים, העוז והענווה לחי עולמים, יאללה 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 הגדוד והפאר לחי עולמים, הצבי והצדק לחי עולמים, הקריאה והקדושה לחי עולמים, הרון והרוממות לחי עולמים, יאללה 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 השיר והשבח לחי עולמים, התהילה והתפארת לחי עולמים, השיר והשבח לחי עולמים, התהילה והתפארת לחי עולמים, יאללה יאללה
Page 269, the conclusion of the Nature Great Lights prayer.
וחדש הציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו במהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות.
And Shira Katz gets the prize, ABC order, or rather ABG order, because it's Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Sometimes our ancient poets would use an alphabet acrostic and make beautiful music out of it, like we just did. Thank you. Page 275, we're going to introduce the theme of Torah and love. We go from the cosmos, like wide angle, and then we sort of turn it into a telephoto and we go deep into one group, a family, a set of stories, a set of communities. And that combination of the big and the small is what gets us ready to acknowledge the unity of all, because this is the intro to the Shema, which Cassidy Unger will be leading us in after page 275. So sing along, and then Cassidy, be ready to unmute, and we will all join on the following page. V'ha'erinenu b'toratecha v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha ve'yached levavenu le'ahava u'nira et shemecha ve'lo nevosh ve'lo nikaleh ve'lo nikasher Le'olam va'ed, ki v'shem kodshecha, hagadol v'hanora batachnu, nagila v'nismecha, yeshuatecha. V'havinu l'shalom erba kanfot haaretz, v'tolichenu kamamiut le'artzenu, ki el poel yeshuot ata, v'keravtanu l'shimcha hagadol, selah be'emet, lehodot lecha u'liachedcha be'ahava, baruch ata Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto Le'olam va'ed, ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, ולכל נפשך ולכל מילותיך, והיו הדברים הארץ, אשר אנוכי נתך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם עיניך, וטיבחת בם, ושבתך ביתך, וברכך בטרת, ושכתום עודיך, והיו שותפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
Yeshikoach. A moment to continue on our own, the next couple pages. Vayayim Shmot Yishmon Tzvitei. 285, 4 lines from the bottom. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים אלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Adonai Elohechem Emet. So the last of the prayers that surround the Shema before the Amidah, we're doing 3 big ones now, and then the Amidah is 7 big ones coming up. And the transition is about freedom. We already thought about nature, which is for everyone, and Torah and connection, which is a little smaller. And then we move on to freedom and the importance of everyone having their rights while exercising their responsibilities. Page 291, Huxley is going to lead us in Micha Mocha, and then we're going to continue and rise at the bottom of the page and be ready for the Amidah, the long standing prayer. When we get there, we do the first 3 out loud, and then we'll have some silent time to do the next 4 or whatever is rising up in our hearts and our minds. Page 291, Huxley.
Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha ba'elim Adonai. Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha, Micha Mocha. Mi kamocha, mi kamocha, nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot, osef ele. Nora tehilot, osef ele.
שירה, שירה, שירה חדשה, שירה, שירה, שירה חדשה, שירה, שירה, שירה חדשה, שירו גאולים. לשמך עד שפת הים, לשמך עד שפת הים, לשמך עד שפת הים, לשמך על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו וימלכו ואמרו, אדוני תמלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, עובדך ומלך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני
Baruch Shemo.
God Israel.
Amen.
Page 295. Adonai sifatai tiftachu fi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מחלקל חיים בחסד, מחיה כל חיים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה לך חיות כל חי, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה כל נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך וכרזה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנשאים למצרפים לעומתם, ברוך יום העירו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, מתי תמלוך בציון, מתי תמלוך בציון, מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים, ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך, ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Please continue with your own prayers or meditations, or the prayers on the following pages. We'll come together at the end with a prayer for peace.
Page 323. If you're still in your Amidah, keep going. Otherwise, join in a Cheryl Hurwitz original, Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimeru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimeru amen. Thank you so much, Cheryl, as our davener this morning, and thank you to all of the many Limud students who are rolling up their sleeves and unmuting their computers and helping us as well. Beautiful to be together. We turn our energies now toward the Torah, and although it's live, the reading this morning is going to be via distance, so we're not actually going to take it out, but it's really here, see, really 3D. It's not a green screen. So on page 387, we're going to have the nigun again, because like all good modern nigunim, the one that we're focused on this morning for Ashrei has a little old lilt to it so that it fits. Page 387, even though this is in part a family service, we're going to try to throw some non-Hebrew and non-English at you. And I want you to try your best to follow along the last 3 lines. This is a traditional piece in Aramaic, which is the language that our ancestors spoke in Israel about 2,000 years ago. Like Hillel and Jesus and his family probably spoke Aramaic along with Greek and some Hebrew. And so we still have it, and it's a beautiful melody. And sometimes we do it and sometimes we don't. And I wanted you to all hear it. So try to follow along. You're not going to recognize the words like you do sometimes in Hebrew, but you'll recognize the letters and the sounds, and everyone follow along, ending in our Yainai. Here we go. Be'ana rachetz, v'lishme kadisha, kadisha yakira, ana amar tushbechan. Be'ana rachetz, be'ana rachetz, v'lishme kadisha, kadisha yakira, ana amar tushbechan. Yeherava kadamach, v'tiftach libi be'oraita, v'tashlim mish'alin delibi, v'liba dechol amach Yisrael, letavu chayin v'lishlam. Amen. Ay, ay, oh. Good Shabbos, everyone. Based on what I'm about to share with you from Exodus chapter 25, Parshat Teruma, you may expect Jim Carrey to join us. He's not, but that's okay. We are going to enjoy ourselves the Truma show. Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, vayikhu li truma, and say this, let them take for me, yikhu li truma, truma, gifts, truma, offerings, truma, extras. Me'et kol ish, from every person, asher yidvenu libo, every person whose heart is willing. The root of a volunteer is a mitnadev, and generosity with time or resources is hitnadvut. You hear the nadava, as in the Hebrew name Nadav, that is generosity and gifting. So every person who is of generous spirit, tikhu et trumati, they should take my gifts. And everyone who gives gets to be part of something huge. It's the classic idea of sacrifice. Yes, you're giving something up, but it's actually a bargain because you're getting something amazing, being part of something huge in return. And so we gladly give up the thing to be part of something big. Question, whose gifts? Can we imagine that someone was turned away from giving a gift to make the temple because they had a funny accent, or because they were in a wheelchair, or because their skin color looked different than most of the others? Can you possibly imagine? This is God's house. We are all part of it. Whose gifts? Our gifts. A very important theme this morning. We all belong. We are all on a good day, and we need to make sure it's a good day for everyone every day, that we are all included and valued and respected, that everyone is honored and accepted and loved. A few verses down in this parsha is the famous V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. God saying, let them make for me a dwelling place, a mishkan, a sanctuary. Sanctuary, like a safe space, right? A beautiful space. And I will dwell among them. God will be in our midst, not just in the sanctuary, everywhere, if we take that step of building with our generosity. Only if we build a community through generosity will the divine be dwelling among us. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham, let them make me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell among them. Long before the ADA in 1990, who could ascend the famous mighty steps of the temple in Jerusalem, and who couldn't? They obviously didn't have elevators back then. They did have ramps, and they did use them. But thinking about these questions of accessibility, is everyone honored? Is everyone valued? Is everyone included? This happens to be the beginning for every February of Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, JDAIM, a mouthful. But each of those is really important. There is a larger disability awareness community, but we need to bring it into our Jewish world. Disability, we need to name that not everyone has the same abilities, but that doesn't mean that everyone is unequal in their value and in what they can contribute. We simply need awareness, not so simple, and then acceptance, and then inclusion. And that means doing the work. And the only word I have a problem with in this mouthful is month, because it should be all the time. But that's why we focus in sometimes once a year to lift up a principle that we carry through the rest of the year. I want to thank Rachel Saradsky last night on our Friday night for sharing this beautiful infographic with me that shows 4 stages. And you may recognize some Shel Silverstein action here, lightly updated. Excellent, thank you. Yes, different abilities but equal value, as you will see. So inequality, if you happen to be on the side of the tree that has all the fruit and it's bending toward you, then you get the fruit and the person on the right is like, huh, what's up? That is inequality and that is not okay. But equality, all we have to do is give everyone the same thing and then they're equal, right? Take a look at the picture, maybe not so much. So we have to go harder than simply saying everyone gets the same, because everyone needs different things to approach real equity. Equity is when everyone is able to have a fair shot. And that means everyone gets the things they need for their physical or their emotional or their communal place. Everyone has what they need, but still one person maybe doesn't have as much fruit on their side and has to climb up higher, and that's not exactly equal. So think about justice. Remember the shape of the tree, right? Well, just imagine if you could train that tree to grow straight, and then the fruit would be more balanced. So by fixing the system, we can offer equal access to tools and opportunities, and that is justice. So thank you, Rachel Saradsky. You see them all right here. Love this. Great reminder of the work that we are to do. So there's an important book that's been talked about in the New York Times and the NPR. It's called We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation by a gentleman named Eric Garcia. And I want you all, if you can, to plan to stay here until 11 o'clock or 11:05, somewhere in there, when Eric Garcia, the author, is going to actually join us. So he'll be saying all this, but one of his theses, one of the main points of his book is that it takes government, it takes community getting together, that he was the lucky beneficiary of some services, thanks to the Americans with Disabilities Act, that people with autism before him never had. And we can do even better for the next generation. We have to. That's one of his core messages. And the take home, when he was asked by the New York Times interviewer for the short version, whether you know it or not, you know someone with autism, and therefore we're all affected, we're all implicated. We often talk about autism while talking past autistic people. So we need to include as many voices, cover as many people as possible, and if you truly care, we've got to listen. So inclusion is the word of the month, and inclusion works in the context of disabilities inclusion, awareness, acceptance, and action, but it also is famous from diversity, equity, inclusion, when we think about an even broader sense of who feels comfortable coming into our spaces and who doesn't. How much do we treasure those things? And there's a different way. DEI is the acronym, diversity, equity, inclusion, but there's the one I prefer is JEDI. We can all be JEDI warriors by putting justice first and then keeping the equity, diversity, and inclusion. So one last piece of Torah on that theme that will relate to another significance of February, both around inclusion and both around sanctuary. Mishkan, what it means to all feel welcome. And by the way, for the kids from Limud, I want to make sure that we remember the intergenerational angle also. Everyone needs to feel welcome, the youngest and the oldest. And as we get back to coming in person here, I look forward to seeing you out there, that everyone know that you're welcome and everyone strive to make that spirit of welcome for everyone else. The question of how to make Jewish sanctuaries truly safe by local amazing organizer and educator Rachel Faulkner, a warm acquaintance of many of ours and just an incredible person. She wrote for Trua.org, Rabbis for Human Rights. She's not a rabbi, but she's on the Trua board as this incredible activist, talking about Truma and the sanctuary that we're building in Exodus 25. In addition to being a communal meeting place, the sanctuary was a place of safety. People could even flee there and come under God's protection. And as she writes, I understand the place of safety we build our synagogue sanctuaries to be. Just have to think about a few weeks ago in Texas. We need detailed instructions like those in Parshat Truma. We need safety. But just like sanctuary, we would also need those detailed instructions like in Exodus for our homes and schools, grocery stores. I want them all to be safe. Is safety wherever I go? Is that asking too much? Well, except safety wherever I go has always been too lofty for her. In my body, she writes, in its blackness, queerness, and Jewishness, safety has always been a bit of an illusion, seemingly out of reach. In synagogue, I can be assumed to be a stranger. Just driving down the road, a police officer can assume me to be a threat. My safety is never guaranteed. So the reality for me is safety in sanctuaries is just a start. We need a safe world. And that's exactly where to start. I'm quoting her, but I'm quoting me too. I want our Jewish communal sanctuaries to be the refuge God intended them to be from the beginning, when we were given those instructions to make the space where God could dwell with us. Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. I believe creating safe Jewish sanctuaries takes these instructions and a commitment. So grown-ups, you can scan very important few ideas centering the voices of Jews of color, thinking about local communal safety practices, combating our fear to make our spaces welcoming and inclusive. Surely it was daunting to the Israelites in the desert in Exodus 25, and it's daunting here and now to build fully inclusive, fully safe communities. But the good news is it can start with a conversation. So reach out and ask. In particular, reach out to people who most often have a different equation of safety and relationship with officers based on racialized history in this country. And as she writes, as we enter Black History Month, which is also February, there's no better day than today. Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. Let them make me a sanctuary so that I shall dwell among them. Shabbat Shalom. Our co-Zoom Gabbai is also our Torah reader this morning. So we're just going to hear the maftir. And Stu, if you're willing to be the aliyah as well, that would be awesome. You can either use the page 169, 171, or the full. It's up to you on 399. But we are going to introduce him in the traditional way with a little untraditional twist. This is on page 395. Ay, ay, yadadayo. Ay, 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 oh. Ay, 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 oh. Vayazor, vayagen, veyoshia lechol hachosim bo. Kol hachosim bo venomar amen. Hakol havu godel Eloheinu ut Na'amod, Stu, Simon, Hamaftir. We are hearing, we already looked at the beginning of Truma. We're just going to the very end. If you have your Chumash, it may already be in the chat. Thank you so much. Page 611 in the old edition, or 552 in the new. The end of Parshat Truma, with all of its architectural details, is Exodus 27, verse 17.
Okay, so should I read 395 or the, okay. Yeah, Azor Yagain
399, if you're going to do it, right, the bracha. Thank you.
399, okay. Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher karvanu la'avodato v'natan lanu et haTorah. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Kalamudei echatzer saviv mechushakim kesef vavihem kasef va'adnehem nechoshet orech echatzer me'abama rochav chamishim v'chamishim v'koma chamesh amot shesh mashzar v'adnehem nechoshet v'chol b'lei chamishkan v'chol avodato v'chol yitedotav v'chol yitot chechatzer nechoshet. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach, and thank you. We get a taste of Torah. We think about architecture and sustainability, and we just look around. Take a minute and thank whoever designed and whoever built the space you're in. Maybe your living room, maybe an office, maybe a porch. It's a little cold, but look around and be grateful for those detailed instructions of how to build sacred space. And then remember, it gets sacred by what we do in it. So let's keep our spaces sacred. And I think every time that we spend an hour or two on Zoom from our homes with each other, we are lifting up the sanctity of our own mishkans, our own sacred spaces. Thank you, Stu. And again, thank you, Stu and Shelley, our Zoom Gabayim. And thank you, Sarah and Eliana, who have joined their parents. The conclusion of the Torah service is on page 441, and they're going to wave at all of their Limud students out there.
Es chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomchecha meushar devachecha darchei noam v'chol netivotecha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Hadish, Hadish Yameinu kekedem.
So much. We didn't have the Torah out, so we didn't need to do the Misha Berach there. The Musaf offering is the extra the amplification of some key themes. There is brokenness in the world, and in this month of inclusion and awareness, that to realize the disability is most often not the impediment. It's the lack of awareness and acceptance and inclusion and resources. And similarly, in Black History Month and the question of how to make our communities as safe as possible for everyone, the problem is not inherently having your ancestors come from a different part of the world and having a different skin tone. The problem is the lack of understanding and love and justice. And so sometimes for healing, our prayer is macro, it's big. It's praying for change in the society, which sometimes means praying for and committing to change starting in ourselves. And sometimes for the challenges that our loved ones face, it is anything. There are people who are struggling with COVID and struggling with cancer and struggling with age and infirmity. There are so many reasons why healing may be needed. I want to invite us to put names into the chat. Oh, I see the sound was down, sorry. Put names into the chat of beloveds for whom we would like to lift up a particular blessing of healing. And then we will sing a healing prayer and send it out to everyone.
Using the melody from Micah Halpert that we learned a few months ago. Ana el narifanala, Ana el narifanalo, 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 Ana el narifanala, Ana el narifanalo. Refuah Shlema.
A beautiful list. We turn for just a moment to the memory of those who are no longer with us as we're in the home stretch of our prayer part of the morning together, remembering to stay for Eric Garcia in just a few minutes. There are a number of losses just in the last month. We're wrapping up Shloshim, the 30-day period, just this weekend for Judy Greenwald's mother, Regina. And we are still in that period of Shloshim with Kate Whiting remembering her mother, Isabel Duffield, with Mike and Lori Persh remembering his mother, Doris Persh, with Susan Goldberg remembering her brother, Ed Malikin. And most recently, our hearts are with Dinah Leventhal for the passing of her 88-year-old giant of a dad, Dr. Carl Leventhal. The funeral was yesterday, and Shiva is the next 3 nights at 7 p.m. It's being organized through Bethel, where he was a member, and one of the daughters is connected. So look on the listserv, find the information, and you have to register. There's an extra step for the Bethel procedure, but it is worth it. Check the revised notice that went out yesterday afternoon. And I'll be leading tomorrow night, but we're welcome to all any of them, Rabbi Greg Harris leading tonight, and Chazan Ramon Tassat of Shirat HaNefesh, where George Leventhal is a member on Monday. You're welcome to any or all of those shivas. We remember as well those whose yahrzeits, the anniversary of their death, falls from today through the end of this week. We remember Chuck Konigsberg's uncle, Larry Lichtig, Mimi Blasiak's mother, Gertie Lehrer, Einabel Levin's mother, Ruth, Julia Tossel's mother, Ida Weinstein, Julie Glass's father, Daniel, Gila Franklin Siegel's father, Shep Franklin, Hannah Weisberger's father, Yaakov, Bob Barkin's grandmother, Jenny Chortek, Gail Fisher's father, Mayor Fenig, Judy Perez's mother, Naomi Perez Epstein, Deborah Basilis's uncle, Daniel Roth, Putzi Hirschberg's mother, Margaret Wesson, Ken Cantor's mother, Rose, Dawn Levinson's grandmother, Audrey Samet, Lauren M. Dursky's grandmother, Mary Tech, Ira Abrams' mother, Edith Abramowitz, Jeff Weintraub's father, David, Jackie Glass's father, Ernest, Debbie Trope's mother, Sheila, Nechama Babin's mother, Helen, Betsy Turetsky's father, Bert Rudin, Sandy Brody's mother, Vivian Kravitz, Phil Abrams' father, Norman, Jesse Abraham's father, Bernard, Bob Barkin's uncle, Samuel Chortek, Lori Persh's father, Jerome Cuff, Michael Ostheimer's father, Jack, Stephen Isaacson's father, Edwin, and Estelle Quain's mother, Mildred. Inviting all those who are in mourning or commemorating a yahrzeit to rise, as may be your custom, page 451, Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's couch.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי בכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו
Amen. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל Vimru.
Amen. Zichronam livracha, all of their memories for a blessing. Tikkun olam, to repair the world. We talk about it a lot. We even talk about it in Limud. Some of our first and second graders know Tikkun olam, and they know that it means that there's work to do wherever people don't have opportunity, wherever we don't yet have equity and justice. So I want to commend Naomi Edelson mentioned that her sister Rivka, who's active in the Reconstructionist Synagogue in Amherst, Massachusetts, and has health challenges and has found Zoom to be an incredible boon, had a beautiful piece in, of all local rags, the Washington Post last summer, and she's going to send that link around as a reminder of the gift that this is for so many of us, and the need to keep reaching out to each other and staying as connected as we possibly can. It's distinct but related to both the making our sanctuaries safe, apropos of Black History Month, and inclusion and equity and justice for people of all backgrounds. And of course, Jewish Disabilities Awareness and Inclusion Month, and the need to be as focused as possible on making sure that everyone is in community together. So again, in just a few minutes, Eric Garcia is really a tikkun olam speaker by helping us think through how we, as a community, as individuals, and as a society, can do better. Tikkun olam is actually in the third paragraph of the Aleinu. We're on page 445 for this final prayer, and there's the expression letaken olam, to repair the world, b'malchut Shaddai, through God's rule, to recognize that it is a godly world that we inhabit. We then see the godliness in everything and everyone, and we do our best to lift it up. So with that kavanah, page 445, invite us to rise in body or in spirit. And very importantly, we ask Lila Bernstein to unmute and lead us in the first part, and then a moment of silence to continue, and then she'll lead us at the very end on 449 as well. Lila, please.
ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Shunot Shemayim v'Yosef Eretz Moshe B'Krovash B'Nosh B'Nezuz B'Kavayim Ra'avinu L'Makim V'As Al-Ken Kavayim Letaken Olam B'Malchut Shaddai. Lila?
ככתוב בתורה ובידעתיים יחשבות אל ברך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחתיו.
Yashikach. Thank you. And then the next kakatuv on page 449, 2 lines from the bottom. Kakatuv b'Toratecha, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, v'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, v'yom hahu, v'yom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo, u'shemo, u'shemo echad. You may be seated. Thank you again to all of the students and families that have participated. Thank you again to Cheryl, our Davener extraordinaire. Thank you again to Shelley and Stu, our Zoom Gabayim. And thank you to all of us for constituting community and being open to what it takes to make our community ever more inclusive, ever more equitable, ever more welcoming, and ever more just. Hal Siegel.
Actually, Rabbi Fred, I'm going to be subbing for Hal today.
Yeah, you did that a lot for a couple of years, and vice versa. Shelley and Hal are immediate past co-presidents, so I think you can speak for him and you in one voice.
I can speak for him. I can speak for the entire board to say welcome everyone, Shabbat Shalom, and a special welcome to our guests. We're very much looking forward to hearing from Eric Garcia in a few minutes. And I just want to tell all the kids who are on, it's so nice to be with you. It's lovely to have you participate in the service, and we look forward to seeing more of that when we get back into the building. and actually continuing on Zoom until we get back into the building. I'm going to actually flip this over to Stu, who has an announcement about tomorrow's program. So Stu, if you want to take it over. And again, Shabbat Shalom all.
Shabbat Shalom. So in the, speaking of a fairer, more inclusive community, so many of you have heard about the Thrive 2050 Montgomery County land use plan. Similar land use plans are being proposed around the area. I know there's some controversy around that. But in the preface to the plan, they specifically address the issue of equitability and inclusion and climate justice. If you'd like to learn more and ask questions of one of the people who helped develop the plan, we have a program tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'll put the link on Zoom, sponsored by the Climate Action Team and the Social Action Committee of Adat Shalom. Please come with your questions. It's a big deal for the county. Thank you. So the link is in the chat.
Thank you so much, Stu, on many fronts, including this. Hope to see many of you there and throughout the week and beyond. With so much going on, check, as always, social solidarity. If you're not on the list, let us know. It did change over the system recently, so if you haven't seen social solidarity in a couple of weeks, I'm not quite sure how you got on today, but let us know and we will take care of it for you. And next week, we are thrilled to welcome Aaron Amdur-Cass to this Bima as he becomes B Mitzvah, as we've been doing, but maybe if Omicron continues to wane, not for too much longer, of only the B Mitzvah family in the room, and it will still be a Zoom service for the rest of us. We hope within 3 weeks or so that will shift. So stay tuned. Week by week, we are consulting with the experts. And speaking of experts, in a moment, we're going to turn it over to expert Eric Garcia with first an introduction from our Inclusion Advisory Committee representative, Emily Novick, with such gratitude for what you and the others of the IAC are doing. But before that, to expert Naomi Beal, the last of our Limud participants. Kiddush is on page 465. Rising is optional. 465. Naomi? Oh dear.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Veshamru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam. B'nei Levine, B'nei Israel, otit leolam, otit leolam. V'shamru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam. Kesheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uveshamru b'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam. Uveyom hashvi Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash, v'shamru b'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam.
Ken berach Adonai et Yom HaShabbat vayikadshehu. Savri chaverai.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Savri havarei, Baruch Adonai, Eloheinu ruach haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen. Yasher Koach, and good Shabbos, everyone. Ay, 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 oh, ay, 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 oh, ay, 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 oh. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, everyone. Obviously, kids and families, if you need to get your spilkies out, feel free. But Eric is a presentation for all ages as well, with a challenge that needs to be taken up by people of all ages and stages. I'm honored to turn this over to Emily Novick.
Thank you, Rabbi Fred, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. As Rabbi Fred noted, February is Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month, and synagogues across the country are hosting speakers and sponsoring events throughout the month to mark this important observance. Although disability inclusion is an issue we should think about every day of the year, February is a chance for us to give it a special focus. So today, Adat Shalom and the Adat Shalom Inclusion Advisory Committee, or IAC, is pleased to welcome Eric Garcia, an autistic journalist who is a senior Washington correspondent for The Independent and a columnist for MSNBC. In the past, Eric has been an assistant editor of the Washington Post's Outlook section, an associate editor for The Hill, and a correspondent for the National Journal, Market Watch, and Roll Call. Eric has also been published in the Daily Beast, The New Republic, and Salon.com. He is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And as Rabbi Fred mentioned, Eric is the author of the 2021 book, We Are Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation. And I know that reading the book has really changed the conversation for me. So now I'll turn it over to Eric to share some highlights from his book. And after his talk, we'll have some time for questions and conversation. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you to the congregation. Shabbat Shalom and Baruch Hashem for such a blessing. And we talked about, I heard the rabbi talk wonderfully about how we make the places we inhabit holy ground and how we make places accessible. And the fact that we are doing this over Zoom, while I would love to be able to be around you and to meet you and discuss with you, what you are doing is truly sacred in the holiest sense of the word, because you are showing that you value people's lives and people's health above the formalities, and that is a blessing in and of itself. I know I am not Jewish. I am Christian. I was raised Christian. I am Christian. But the traditions of Judaism and Jewishness, because I know those two things are very different, and sometimes a Venn diagram, is so intertwined with the story of disability rights. Our fates are mutually entangled. As Dr. King said, we are together in a garment of justice. We cannot be separate. This month that I'm speaking to you is Black History Month, and it is Jewish Disability Inclusion Month, but it is also on the heels of Holocaust Memorial Day. And I want to talk about the history of autism in that specific context, because when the Nazis were occupying Vienna, there was a young professor by the name of Hans Asperger who had a clinic, and the name Asperger syndrome might sound familiar to you because yes, that is where Asperger syndrome comes from. And he was studying and he was researching his children. And at the time, what happened was, for a long time, we believed that he was a lot like an Oskar Schindler, someone who harbored autistic children and protected them from the Nazis. And instead, what we found was, while he may or may not have been a formal Nazi, he certainly, according to one study, quote unquote, actively cooperated with the Nazis' racial hygiene program and referred children to a clinic where some of them died. And this is important because we recognize that, just as the rabbi said, that it is systems and it is structures that prevent people from thriving, that prevent people from living themselves. In the same way, the impulses behind ableism are the same impulses behind racism, the same impulses behind anti-Semitism and homophobia and transphobia and sexism and any type of phobias. And it is important to recognize that these phobias are not simply a product of personal sentiment, but they are an outpouring. They are embedded into our daily structures. And some people may say, well, that makes this whole thing hopeless. If it's not about personal sentiment, then it is about structures. I think of it as a beautiful thing because I think that it means that structures can be changed by good people. Structures, particularly in a democracy, which argues that men and women and non-binary people can make decisions. They can subsequently decide that these structures are no longer the world we want to live in. And we can change these structures. So when we talk about structural racism or structural ableism or structural integrity, we are not saying, contrary to what some people like Governor Glenn Youngkin might say, that we are all inherently evil, or whites are inherently evil, or disabled people are inherently evil. But rather we are saying that we can change these structures, that they can be fixed, that good people can end the pervasiveness of this. And in the same respect, I also want to talk about, I can't talk about the negative without talking about the positive. That's not who I am. We must look at the light and the shade. In the same way, the people who have brought down the pillars of racism and ableism and anti-Semitism have often been together. Judith Heumann in the Section 504 sit-ins. I don't know how many people saw Crib Camp, but she was a Jewish woman whose parents survived the Holocaust. And she worked to make America and the world more accessible, both with American disability activism and in the State Department. She was aided by the Black Panther Party during the 504 sit-ins, which provided food, it provided shelter. And this shows that in the same way that the world was inaccessible and the government did not want to make the world accessible. But when the world was brought to heel by forces of good, of Jews and Christians and non-believers and Muslims, then we can, as Jewish tradition says, tikkun olam, repair the world. Growing up, I learned about tikkun olam, and I became in one of the first communities that really welcomed me when I moved to Washington, D.C. as a young intern in 2011 was the Jewish community. And it was that heritage of tikkun olam that was something I did not know about, despite growing up with Jews in my community, but it replenished my soul, and it continues to replenish my soul. So in the same way, I hope that we can recognize, as the rabbi said, that rather than change, I think I saw that wonderful cartoon with Shel Silverstein. One of the things that really heartened me was that it did not change the child who did not have access to the apples. Rather, it changed the tree. It said that the child who did not have access to the apples did not need to be fixed. We did not need to move the child to the other side of the tree. We needed to simply fix the tree. We needed to add ladders. We needed to add other things. And if the child was in a wheelchair, then maybe there could be a lifting crane. But there was never. But the argument was that it was never about the child. It was about the world. It's about the fallen state of the world. And in the same way, my underlying argument and my underlying principle has always been that autistic people, just like Jewish people, just like Black people, just like queer people, just like Latinos and Asian Americans, are fine as they are. They are not broken. They are not failed versions of normal. And oftentimes we do more harm than good when we try to change them. But we can make ourselves freer by making the world more accessible. It frees not only the disabled person, but it frees the abled person. Putting a curb cut on the sidewalk frees not only the person on the wheelchair, it frees the parent with a stroller. Our fates are intertwined, and policy it can be an act of hatred, or it can be an act of love. It can be an act that knocks down, or it can be an act that constructs. So with that in mind, I want to thank this wonderful, blessed congregation, and I'd be glad to take questions. Anybody?
If people are shy, I can start with one that I know came up when I was doing the promotion for this event, for your talk,
Sure,
which
please.
is why do you and why do others choose? It's the question about language, identity first versus person first. Why do you choose to be called an autistic journalist versus a journalist with autism? Thanks.
That is a very, very good question, and I want to give this the attention it deserves. I think that for a long time, parents preferred person-first language because they didn't want their children, parents, clinicians, social workers, didn't want their children to be defined by it. They didn't want to be limited by it. But what autistic people themselves have said is that, no, this is an inextricable part of our identity. This is part of who we are. This is part of why we, this affects every facet of our life. And we need you to see our disability. You see a lot of people saying, see the person, not the disability. No, as my friend Rebecca Coakley says, we need you to see the disability because we need you to make the world accessible for us. So in the same way, I was trying to say that being autistic is not a trait that I can put on the shelf. It's something that defines me. We hear a lot of student stories saying they don't let this disability define you. Actually, it kind of does define us. What we shouldn't let define us is the ableism around us. So yes, that's why. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Yes, thank you. And we have a question in the chat. Could you describe the challenges you faced in growing up compared to other children without autism?
Oh, that's a great question. It's always peculiar, isn't it? Because I don't know anything other than being autistic. But I think what I would say is that, you know, we talk a lot about diagnostic labels and when you get the diagnosis, things like that. The thing that we don't recognize is kids on the playground also have diagnosis labels, except their labels are not as medical, and they can often be more cruel. One of the things I remember was one time when I was in special education, I'll never forget this, as this program was called RSP. It was at Butterfield Elementary School in Chino Hills, California. At recess, one of the kids said, "You know what RSP stands for?" And I said, "What?" And then he said, "Really stupid people." And a sign of how pervasive how much that's tattooed. That was in 4th grade. I was 9 and I'm 31 now. I don't even remember what RSP originally stand for, but I remember what that stood for. And that is a wound, and that is a wound that we do not shake easily. And so that was the other thing. But I think also a lot of times as a kid, I was really sensitive to noise. Like according to my mom, I was really sensitive to, like, I would get overwhelmed when I would hear the intercom at the grocery store, or I would get overwhelmed when I heard when the phone would ring. But more than anything, I think the difficult thing was I was an incredibly lonely kid because I didn't always understand how to interact with people. I didn't always understand social cues. I didn't always understand when I was info dumping and I was just speaking out of turn, and when someone was bored, or when I was not being as gracious. And that wasn't because I didn't care. I absolutely did care, but I just didn't know how to interact. And at the same time, I think a lot of times I still would get sensory overwhelming. One of the most vivid memories is I remember when I was in Disneyland and when the fireworks were going off, it was hell. It was a meltdown. So it was important. So yeah, I think it was interesting how these events they still are tattooed in my brain. So
Thank you. There's another question from someone who is a fellow Tar Heel
Yes.
who wants to know, what was your experience like as a college student?
Yes, that is a great question. And tonight I should say that that my Carolina Tar Heels will be playing the Duke Blue Devils. So I know that the Ackerman family will be watching. But that is a really important question, because I think what I talk about and what I read in the book is that I was a transfer student. So I went to the community college my first year and a half. Then I went to go intern at the White House in the Obama administration. Then while I was there, I got accepted to the University of North Carolina. And initially, I think that community college was great for me. It was really important. It was necessary, and it was vital for me. But beyond that, I also think that I wasn't prepared for the academic course load, and how ponderous that would be, and how just unbelievably overwhelming it would be. So I remember a lot of time, and I think I'd never lived in North Carolina. I grew up in California. I was born in Chicago. So it's just my first year was very isolating. And I remember what happened is, I remember I bombed on a test I studied all night for. I'll never forget, it was my African music class. And what you had to do is you had to match the music that was playing in the test to the country that was the country that I matched. And I remember I went to my professor afterward, and it was right before fall, it was the day fall break was starting. And I was like, okay, that was my feeling of saying no mas. Because for a long time I didn't want accommodations. I was worried that it would put an asterisk to my success. But then finally I just went to my professor. I said, I'm autistic, I need help. And I'll never forget, he called student services office. I understand this was before fall break. This is when he could have easily gone off to, gone home, whatever. And he said, they're waiting for you. Go. And I met with my eventual counselor, my guidance counselor, and we planned my weeks out, everything like that. And that gave me structure, because I think a lot of times it was really difficult to do it, because once I went to university, there wasn't that structure like K-12 or even community college. So that assisted me. And then I also remember that my student counselor said to my counselor, who specialized in disability, she suggested, why don't you join your college newspaper? And that gave me community, and it gave me a structure, and it gave me things that I did, because I was not a North Carolinian. I didn't know anything about North Carolina, but that gave me friends. And literally tonight we're going to go watch we're going to go watch the Carolina basketball game, because a lot of my friends now live in DC. But then the other thing that I remember is I had a professor, and I'm sorry if I'm going a little too long on this, but I remember I had another professor in my senior year. It was for my Southern politics class. His name was, I'll never forget it, his name was Farrell Guillory. He was the epitome of a Southern gentleman. He had a very heavy Louisiana accent. And I remember I did okay on an assignment, but I knew it wasn't great. And then right before class one day, he invites me in. He's like, come to my office. And I was like, okay. I was like, am I in trouble or anything like that? He closed the door and he says, I just want to know, do you have Asperger syndrome? And on one end, I wanted to reach over and because like, what gives you the right to ask that? And I should say, professors, that is like, I think that's actually against the law. That's a violation of, I think, FERPA or something. But my response was actually, how'd you know? And he says, I have a loved one who's on the spectrum. I understand. He's like, come to my office every week. He's like, I won't help you do the assignment, but I'll help you think through these ideas. Because he had to write a column every week, because it was a journalism class, and yeah, that's what I did every week. Also, what he did is he would hand me columns of people who he read, the columnists he read, and it taught me how to think things through, and it taught me how to narrow down the way that I narrow down my ideas and nail them down and create these really precise things that I wound up getting an A in the class. But that was an example of empathy, and that was an example of a professor being able to spot these things and having that sensus fidelium almost, to borrow from Catholic teaching, but like having this sense of it and saying, I understand this, and being empathetic instead of just saying, oh, well, selfless. So that's really what I want to underlie from my experience, was that that I had people around me who cared. And that was what enabled my success. It wasn't just my ability. Don't get me wrong, I worked my tail off, but it was also important that I had people around me. So that's my experience.
Great. We have lots more questions and we may not get to all of them, but that one question is, what accommodations are helpful outside of the educational environment?
Oh, good question. I think that, it's hard to say because autism is so very different. I was talking with someone just the other day who just got diagnosed, and she said that like she deals with, I was like, do you deal with overstimulation or understimulation? And she's like, both. So it's really difficult, but I think that the thing that you have to do is, for example, one of the things that can help is not having so many fluorescent lights in a place, because that could be sensory overwhelming, or not having, I have some plants in this place, but I don't have any that get off a strong odor because that's just too much of a strong scent. Just being cognizant, my phone, I don't have it on that really high so that the sound doesn't, stress me. So it's just being aware of those things. And it's also, I think the other important thing is like, a lot of times autistic people can't say, if we don't have a list of things, because a lot of times, especially for people who didn't get diagnosed later, they didn't realize that this was autism. A lot of times it's just learning by doing, and a lot of times it's learning by asking, and then just touch and go and changing and being willing to adapt and all of these things.
We have a question. How does autism define your life as an adult?
Ooh, really good question. Really great question, actually. It defines a lot of things. So for example, I tried learning how to drive a car. It didn't work. It was just too much sensory input at once. So I just don't drive a car. So I use public transportation. But even then, for example, I have to think about the right times to take the metro to go to work. I have to make sure that it's at a time when so I either arrive a little bit early, I take the train before rush hour, so I can get to work a little bit early, because I can't be in a space with too many people. It'll just be like, it just won't work. Or, for example, I will have to have headphones while I'm working, while I'm writing. I'm a journalist, so like when I'm writing, I have to have headphones so that I can cancel out everything. I can have to have my earbuds in, my AirPods in. In the same respect, I think a lot of times, for my job, I think that like, I'm a bag of nerves when it comes to picking up a phone and talking to people or interviewing people. So like after doing a lot of interviews with people, like when I was on Capitol Hill just earlier this week, I need to take a sensory break for about 20 minutes before I can decompress and get to writing or doing my next interview. So that's the other thing. I think on the other end, so then when I go home, the other thing that's really important is I need a sensory break. Because I spent all day under bright lights or under or with a lot of people or with a lot of things, I need to have I usually turn a lot of my lights on. I usually have only on one light. I'll usually just watch TV, or I won't have on noise too loud. Or what I'll do is I'll just rest, or I'll take a nap in my bed. And then sometimes I'll play guitar, but like just because I need that sensory stimulation. But then most of the time, what I realize is I can't have things smacking me in the face, because I've had my sensory input. I've had enough sensory input for the day that I need low input and low stimulation afterward.
Yeah. Here's a question. As we move towards ongoing remote communications at work and in other venues, how do these new patterns of communication support or create barriers regarding inclusion?
Oh, this is a great question. This is a great question because specifically it does both for people with disabilities. So for example, with being autistic, I think one of the things that's very difficult that was very difficult and is very difficult with Zoom meetings is not being able to read people's facial expressions or reading their social cues. Like now you're just like a square on a screen or a rectangle on a screen, and that makes it difficult to read social cues, or when someone's annoyed, or what their emotions are, or what the environment is, or if they're not gesticulating with their hands or things like that. So that's very difficult. In the same respect, what it also does is it means that you're not in a sensory environment that is too uncomfortable, or that might not be sensory capable. On the other end, it allows you to, if you have difficulty articulating, because sometimes I can't speak, like just sometimes the things caught in my throat. It allows me to just type things out and type it to my boss, or type it to my coworkers, and that's important. So I think one of the things we have to think about is, my friend David Perry, who is disabled himself, he's dyslexic, and he has a son with Down syndrome and who's autistic. he said everything that was made accessible during the pandemic must be kept accessible. Everything that was inaccessible must be fixed both during and after the pandemic. So I think it's important to recognize the real dichotomy and the real difficulty, because I think when we talk a lot about, there's a lot of talk about reopening schools right now. The difficult thing is that the children who need services in school, in-person supports, are often the same children who risk getting sick. So it's real. There's no easy solution to that. So I wish I had a better answer, but that's I really wanted to articulate those things.
Oh, that's great. Someone asks, I'm awed by your expressions of hope today in general about the world. As a journalist and with all the craziness in the world today, how are you able to maintain such hope?
I don't most days, but I think when I'm around other people who want to prepare the world, I think that's one of the blessings. One of the blessings of being a journalist, that I wake up every morning and I think that I get to live on a world with 7 billion other people. And some of them are terrible, but there are billions of different people with billions of different experiences, and they all need something. And there is an opportunity every day to make things better for them. And even against all hope and against all odds, some way, somehow, people find a way to make things better. Or even if they don't find a way, they work hard at it and they do all they can. And I think that is what inspires me every day, is that there are people who try like hell to make things better.
Great, thank you. Somebody asked, what advice might you give to a loving aunt and uncle of a nephew who was recently diagnosed as being on the spectrum?
Great question. And I answer this question all the time. It changes nothing about how much you love your kids, does it? It changes, your kid is just the same. It just means that the way you love them is going to be different. The way that I articulate it is, most of my family, I don't speak Spanish that well, but a lot of my family speaks Spanish. And I know that when I need to speak Spanish, when I need to speak Spanish to my mostly Spanish speaking relatives, then I need to speak Spanish, but that doesn't diminish my love for them. I may speak terrible Spanish, but the way that we love each other is no different than my English-speaking family members. So that's really important to say, is that the way you love them and the way you care about your autistic loved ones is going to be different, but it's not going to make it any less valid.
Thank you. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Someone asked, hold on, here it is. Slides. How do you include in your rhetoric about inclusivity the needs of people on the spectrum who have more intensive needs, such as being able to live independently, have a job, etc.?
Oh, great question. Inclusion means inclusion for everybody. And that means giving the best services. So this is why I'm not a fan of the terms high functioning or low functioning autism. And I saw a similar question with, how do I include people who are who may not be able to speak, or who are not able to have the same experiences as those like myself. The way that I include those people is that I say that they deserve all the supports and services that they need. They deserve home care. They deserve good, adequate, fully funded home care. Home care has never been fully funded, and a lot of times there's a big waiting list. They deserve assisted communication that allows them to type or allows them to communicate without their voices. Neurodiversity is neurodiversity for everybody, in just the same way that there may be those structural inequities that prevented that child from accessing the apples from the tree. That doesn't nullify that they are fully human and that it isn't possible to live a good life. One of the things that I was really proud of is that I included, I profiled the Rosa family in San Francisco Bay Area. Their son Leo doesn't speak. He's 19 or 20, I believe. He's autistic, but he actually he's been able to live a good life, and his family has adapted, and they have services. California has pretty good home care services, and because of the Laserman Act, they're able to access things. But no, I really made it a point to include autistic people who couldn't speak. I interviewed autistic people. When it came to autistic people who couldn't speak but who could type, I made it a point to email them and give them time to respond to my emails, and instead of doing like a formal sit-down interview. So it was real. But to your point, it was really incredibly vital and important that I included autistic people of all kind of capacities for it. Oh, and I should say, a lot of people were asking me about the new TV show, As We See It. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to see it. So yeah.
So we're out of time. There were a lot of more questions, and all I can say is thank you, Eric, for giving us giving so generously of your time. I encourage everyone to read Eric's book. It is available on Amazon. We Are Not Broken: Changing the Autism Conversation.